Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
Their introduction. In the quiet town of Harrow Ridge, nestled among rolling hills and dense forests, the sense of serenity could often feel deceptive. Residents would stroll down sun-dappled streets, and children laughed in backyards, their sounds of innocence carrying through the air. Yet beneath this facade of normalcy lay an undercurrent of unease that ran deep. A dark chapter of the town's history was about to unfold. It was the summer of 1995, and the scent of blooming wildflowers wafted through the air. But one morning, that familiar fragrance would be replaced with something far more ominous. Maggie Holloway, a beloved high school teacher, was reported missing. Her absence sent shockwaves through the community. Maggie was not just anyone. She was a pillar of Harrow Ridge, a woman whose kindness was matched only by her dedication to her students. As concern grew, search parties formed almost immediately. Friends, family, and neighbors joined together to comb the nearby woods and fields where Maggie often walked. The local sheriff's office, led by Sheriff Tom Granger, launched a thorough investigation, interviewing all who knew her. Maggie was last seen leaving her home to go for a morning jog, a routine that seemed mundane, but would soon trigger a series of events that would forever alter the fabric of the town. The air thickened with tension as days turned into weeks. Posters of Maggie, smiling yet haunting, adorned telephone poles and shop windows. The sense of safety that had once enveloped Harrow Ridge was replaced by whispers of fear and suspicion. He would want to harm someone so well loved. As investigators dug deeper, they began to uncover scenes of secrets woven into the town's very essence's secrets that threatened the community's fragile peace and ultimately their sense of justice. The victim, Maggie Holloway, was more than a name on a missing persons report. She was the heartbeat of Harrow Ridge. At 32, she had become a staple at the local high school, inspiring generations of students with her enthusiasm for literature and her infectious laughter. Colleagues admired her dedication, often remarking that she made time to help any student in need, even if it meant sacrificing her own free hours. Her warmth extended beyond the walls of the classroom. On weekends, Maggie could be found volunteering in a community center where she led reading programs for underprivileged children. She hosted book clubs at the cozy local library and made it a point to actively participate in town meetings, ensuring that every voice was heard or her students. She was not merely an educator but a mentor who instilled confidence and encouraged dreams. Her close friends, including Sarah and Lily, described her as fiercely loyal and incredibly compassionate. The trio often shared evenings over glasses of wine, reminiscing about their university days and discussing everything from relationships to future ambitions. Maggie had a way of making you feel seen. Sarah recalled weeks later, you could tell her anything. As investigators dug into Maggie's life, they discovered the complexities that lay beneath her sunny exterior. While she appeared content, there were inexplicable rifts in her family dynamics. The Holloways had their share of strife. Maggie's relationship with her estranged father was fraught with tension, having been a source of contention since her teenage years. Whether this emotional burden weighed heavily on her or provided motivation remained ambiguous. But it was a piece of the puzzle that wouldn't go unnoticed. Friends began to share stories of Maggie's uncanny intuition, her ability to sense discomfort and sadness in others. She was like a lighthouse in the fog, Lily said. But I worry she never knew how to navigate her own storm. As investigators retraced her last known movements, They began to understand that this beloved educator harbored shadows that remained hidden from those who thought they knew her best. The crime scene. The search for Maggie Holloway intensified as each day passed without a sign of her. When a hiker stumbled upon the scenic isolated clearing just outside Harrow Ridge, what began as a hopeful quest to uncover answers quickly transformed into a nightmare. The remnants of her morning job lay scattered along the narrow path, the vibrant greens of the forest contrasting starkly with the tension that gripped the air. It was early morning when Sheriff Tom Granger arrived at the scene, his gut twisting as he navigated the uneven ground marked by deep underbrush. A group of volunteers stood nearby, agony etched into their faces as they awaited news. When the sheriff spotted a bright blue headband tangled in the undergrowth, his heart sank. The clearing, while serene, bore witness to a sinister act. Dried leaves crunched beneath Granger's polished boots, and he felt the weight of a horror he could scarcely comprehend. A few feet away, broken branches and trampled grass hinted at a struggle, the disorder of the area betraying the peace of the woods. As forensic teams began to comb through the site for clues, the sheriff's instinct screamed that this was no simple disappearance. He noticed a faint trail of red, almost imperceptible, against the earthy tones of the ground. It led toward a thicket, a place that would have been all but ignored by an unsuspecting passerby. Ranger followed it, his every sense heightened for any sign of what had transpired. The brief silence was ruptured by the rustling of leaves as investigators began to secure the area and collect evidence. The once hopeful atmosphere was punctuated by an unshakable dread as the sun climbed higher, casting shadows that danced ominously across the forest floor. Granger felt an unwelcome chill settle in his bones. Somewhere in this tranquil setting lay the truth behind Maggie's fate. But darkness loomed, and he feared it would take more than a search party to unravel the web of secrets hidden in Harrow Ridge. The early investigation. As news of Maggie's disappearance spread like wildfire, the close-knit community of Harrow Ridge grappled with a palpable fear that thrummed through its streets. Sheriff Tom Granger convened a press conference on the steps of the town hall, flanked by concerned citizens and reporters eager for updates. His voice, steady but grave, cut through the murmurs of anxiety that rippled among the crowd. "We are doing everything we can to locate Maggie Holloway," he stated, glancing at the faces of her friends and family who stood nearby, grief etched into their expression. His words were more than just assurances. They were a promise that the investigation would leave no stone unturned. "We ask anyone with information to come forward. Even the smallest detail could be crucial." In the days that followed, the sheriff's office fielded numerous calls from the townsfolk. Maggie's friends provided witness statements, detailing her routine and personalitating a picture of a woman who seemed to light up their lives. But beneath the nostalgia lay an undercurrent of anxiety. Was there someone in their midst who posed a threat? Detectives scoured Maggie's personal life, interviewing former colleagues, students, neighbors. They gained insights into her relationships and discovered a few names hovering like dark clouds. Her estranged father, who still lived in the town, and a former boyfriend, Mark, who had exhibited troubling behaviors during their tumultuous relationship. Both were summoned for questioning, their stories dissected for inconsistencies. Meanwhile, search teams combed through the woods, analyzing every inch of the terrain where the crime scene had been discovered. Cadaver dogs were deployed alongside forensics experts, while drones flew overhead, scanning angles that the human eye could not reach. The media frenzy fueled speculation and theories, with some residents whispering about the curse of Harrow Ridge, a term used for past tragedies that had befallen the town. As the reality of the investigation sunk in, the community's atmosphere shifted. Friends who had once gathered for happy hour now found themselves locked in anxious conversations, sharing suspicions and discussing the possibility that one of their neighbors, a person they had trusted, might be hiding a dark secret. With each passing day, the hope of finding Maggie alive dimmed, but the search for truth ignited a fire that would not easily extinguish. The dead ends. Weeks bled into months, as the search for Maggie Holloway fell into a disheartening routine. Sheriff Tom Granger fueled the investigation with relentless determination. Yet each lead that emerged offered little more than smoke and mirrors. The once vibrant spirit of Harrow Ridge faltered under the weight of uncertainty, and every glimmer of hope faded like morning mist at dawn. The investigators chased down countless tips that trickled in from the community. Most were dead ends, misplaced sightings in neighboring towns, vague recollections of unfamiliar cars parked at odd hours, and shadowy figures entering the wood. Each lead was carefully followed, but with every disappearance of potential evidence, the mystery thickened like a fog that hung low over the valley. The frustration gnawed at the sheriff and his team, forcing them to look at the case from every angle, only to come back to the same frustrating point. Among the theories discussed, the name Mark, the former boyfriend, was bandied about. While his alibi checked out, detectives chose to delve deeper. Friends described their relationship as increasingly volatile, filled with arguments over jealousy and trust. When reached for questioning, Mark appeared nervous but cooperative. Granger noted the sharp glances exchanged between Mark and his friends during the interrogation, a flicker of something unspoken hanging in the air. Meanwhile, Maggie's father, Paul Holloway, became a subject of suspicion too. Years of estrangement might have masked deeper grievances. The father-daughter dynamic, once benign, transformed under the investigative lens. Granger visited Paul's home, a cramped, weather-beaten cottage on the outskirts of town, where he found a silhouette of a grief-stricken man lost in memories. Paul claimed to have been at home the morning of Maggie's disappearance, yet the creases in his voice hinted at a profound regret that unsettled even the most hardened detectives. The harrowing cycle of disappointment made the air heavy, echoing with unvoiced questions. As rumors swirled and suspicions mounted, the town grappled with an unsettling reality. Someone among them harbored secrets also heavy with darkness. Their shared fear, a sense of betrayal by a community member, rustled but the falling autumn leaves, signaling a change. Granger knew the investigation was long from over. The depths of human relationships held the keys to unraveling a mystery that was proving unwilling to yield. With precarious threads slipping through their fingers, time itself became the greatest enemy. A break in the case. As autumn pressed on, painting Harrow Ridge in rich hues of amber and gold, the lifeblood of hope slowly drained from its residents. But just as the dwindling daylight seemed to dim forever, a flicker of promise emerged. Late one evening in early November, a report came in from a nearby park ranger who had recently joined the search effort. He recounted seeing an inconspicuous patch of disturbed soil and unusual tire tracks while on his routine patrol in the dense woodland. Sheriff Tom Granger, with the newfound urgency, organized a small team to investigate the ranger's claims at dawn. Brisk air filled with excitement and tension as their footsteps crunched against the carpet of leaves. While they approached the area that had been pointed out, the ranger guided them confidently, and soon they stood before a half-buried tire track, long dried but still distinct against the earth. He looked out of place. The ranger explained, raking a hand through his tousled hair, almost like someone had been trying to hide something. The atmosphere shifted as the detectives meticulously collected samples. A nearby thicket drew their attention, the growth denser and more chaotic than the surrounding area. Ranger motioned for the team to search it thoroughly. Before long, they unearthed an object wrapped in tattered plastic, revealing a backpack belonging to Maggie. Its contents had been scattered, the zipper torn, in an apparent frenzy. Inside were items that painted a haunting picture: water bottles, a well-worn paperback novel, and a small first aid kit. The backpack told a story, but it was the final object that took Ranger's breath away. A crumpled photograph fell to the ground, revealing Maggie with a red-eyed dog and a man with a striking resemblance to her estranged father. The implication sent chills down his spine. The sheriff collected the photograph with care, knowing it might connect dots that had long eluded him. As the team gathered their findings, the excitement of evidence reignited old tensions. The unsteady trust between the sheriff's office and the town swelled with uncertainty again. By the day's end, it felt as if they had crossed a bridge, now standing at the precipice of deeper truths hidden in the shadows. With the latest discoveries, Granger bent over the evidence table in the station, piecing together the puzzle that Harrow Ridge had become. The photograph not only raised questions about Maggie's past, it could also harbor answers to secrets that had haunted her family. Answers that he feared might be entwined in the darkness surrounding her disappearance. As he prepared for another round of interviews, Granger realized they were no longer searching for a breadcrumb trail, but diving headfirst into the complex web of emotions, familial ties, and buried resentments that had once lain dormant. The suspect. But the photograph of Maggie and her father in hand, Sheriff Tom Granger felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier on his shoulder. The image encapsulated the unresolved tension between a loving daughter and the estranged man who had obscured her light. The time had come to delve deeper into Paul Holloway's psyche, to assess the complicated dynamics of their relationship beyond mere anecdotes and hearsay. The following day, Granger arranged a meeting at the sheriff's office, choosing a private room that enabled a candid conversation away from the prying eyes of the press. Paul arrived punctually, his face drawn and weary, betraying an unsettling mix of grief and agitation. As he settled in, Granger laid the photograph on the table, pointing at the smiling faces captured in what should have been a moment of joy. "Paul, is this you?" Granger asked, studying the man's expression intently. The older man shifted, eyes clouded with something akin to regret, or was it guilt? "I want to understand your relationship with Maggie. It's crucial to our investigation." Paul sat in silence for a moment, the air between them thick with unspoken words. "We had our issues," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But, I still love her. Things got complicated after her mother passed. Things got complicated after her mother passed." His hands trembled slightly as they rested on the table. Granger leaned in, probing gently yet firmly. "Did you see her the day she disappeared? You understand how vital your answers are, Paul. There are too many unanswered questions." Paul shook his head vehemently, his expression hardening. "I wasn't in touch. I can't help you if I don't know anything. Yet as Granger pressed for details, he sensed cracks beginning to form in Paul's composed facade. The man's evasiveness served as a red flag, lighting up a spark within the sheriff that urged him to dig deeper. They discussed the hidden trauma of loss, of estrangement, and how their relationship altered under pressure. But the more Paul spoke, the less convincing his narratives grew. And as the interview progressed, Granger observed Paul's demeanor shift, his posture stiffened. His responses became curt, and each whispered confession hid layers of possible resentment. He was searching for the truth amid shadows. There was something buried beneath each of Paul's words that eluded Granger. Something that revealed a man wrestling with painful memories that might veer into darker terror. Hours later, Paul left the office, his face pale, and a haunting intensity lingered in the room long after he was gone. Granger, seated at his desk, realized that while the investigation had always centered on Maggie's disappearance, it might just as easily unravel the ties of family, love, and betrayal that bound Paul Holloway to his daughter. The suspect now dwelled in the shadows of his own creation, and the deeper they plunged, the more complicated the picture became. If he was to discover the truth, Granger understood there were layers to peel back, secrets to expose, and fragile emotions perhaps too fragile to confront. The trial, the long-awaited trial of Paul Holloway, unfolded before a packed courtroom in Harrow Ridge, where the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The tiny town was divided, with residents torn between their belief in a man they once knew and the haunting possibility that he had committed the most unthinkable act against his own daughter. The weight of both grief and anger pressed heavily on those who filled the wooden benches, as whispers of doubt and speculation twisted through the air like smoke. Months of investigation culminated in this pivotal moment. Evidence gathered during the search of the Woods photograph, the backpack had painted a disturbing portrait of a father-son relationship marred by unresolved conflict. Granger took a position near the front, observing the proceeding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Today's revelations would either unravel years of hidden pain or bring a painful new chapter of resolve. As the prosecution presented its case, a chilling narrative emerged. A father overwhelmed by grief and jealousy, possibly driven to a desperate act to reclaim the bond he once shared with his daughter. Testimonies from friends and family echoed through the courtroom, illustrating both the warmth of Maggie's spirit and the darkness of her father's past. Each piece of evidence unveiled fresh layers of hurt, illuminating the complexity that colored their relationship. Defense attorney Margaret Clay, known for her sharp mind and unwavering composure, worked diligently to unravel the prosecution's claims. She presented Paul as a grieving man, insisting that he had been made a target in the court of public opinion. Her arguments swirled through the courtroom like a tempest, emphasizing the importance of reasonable doubt. As she dissected the prosecution's timeline, she planted seeds of uncertainty, designed to question the validity of each accusation against her client. The pivotal moment arrived when forensic experts took the stand, detailing the physical evidence recovered from the woods. Granger held his breath as they described the findings of blood that matched Maggie's DNA, discovered near the backpack. The courtroom held its collective breath. The weight of that evidence was monumental. Yet Paul remained stoic as he faced the jury, the expression of a man entangled in grief. As the trial progressed, Witnesses recounted conversations they'd witnessed between Maggie and her father, illuminating a complex web of emotions that had manifested in anger, love, and longing. Each testimony heightened the tension, weaving together a narrative of a father desperate to reclaim what was lost. In a closing statement that resonated with deep sorrow, the prosecution painted a chilling picture of how love can fracture under the weight of despair. Granger felt his resolve strengthen. He saw the truth before him, yet the courtroom's air crackled with uncertainty, and ultimately, it would be the jury's decision that would cast light on the shadows of a father's choices. As deliberations commenced, the town watched with bated breath, teetering on the brink of closure while holding tight to the fragile hope that justice might prevail. The echoes of Maggie's laughter seemed to linger while they awaited a verdict that would forever alter the fabric of their small town. The aftermath. The verdict came like a thunderclap, echoing through the silence of the courtroom. Guilty. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. It felt as though time had stopped, and a collective intake of breath rippled through the audience. The triad had captivated Harrow Ridge, but now, as reality set in, the gravity of the jury's decision weighed heavily on the town's conscience. A father was found guilty of the unthinkable, and yet the absence of Maggie Holloway remained a gaping hole in the fabric of the community. Sheriff Tom Granger stood at the back of the courtroom, feeling both a sense of relief and an overwhelming emptiness. He had fought tirelessly for justice, yet victory felt hollow in light of Maggie's fate. As Paul Holloway was led away, Granger noticed a flicker of something in the man's eyes. Was it rage, defeat, or the remnants of love for a daughter that had been lost long before that tragic day? Tragically, the question of why still hovered amidst the ruins of broken lives. In the days that followed the trial, Harrow Ridge struggled to pick up the pieces. Community gatherings that once buzzed with laughter and connection fell into silence. The spirit of the town fractured under grief. Flowers were placed on the front porch of the Holloway home, a gesture of kindness, yet laced with tension. Neighbors exchanged sympathetic glances, their minds churning with their own interpretations of the trial, grappling with the concept that evil could come wrapped in familiar packaging. Maggie's absence loomed large during each town meeting. Conversations among former friends and colleagues became somber, fueled by questions of closure. How does one mourn a loss that felt both personal and communal? As they dealt with the aftermath of betrayal, a painful understanding emerged that unresolved love could still manifest into something poisonous. Granger resumed his work in Harrow Ridge, yet he felt a shadow linger, both within himself and the community. While justice had been served for Maddie, it wasn't the end they had hoped for. People began to rally for a scholarship in her name to honor her legacy, and it became a source of healing the town's way of ensuring that not only Maggie's spirit would endure, but that the lessons of love and communication would guide future generations. Danger slowly settled in like a heavy fog lifting. Though the town would never return to its former state, hope blossomed amid sorrow. The healing process would take time, as residents began to reconnect with each other, sharing stories, building bridges, and forging new futures in honor of the woman who had touched so many lives. As winter approached, Granger stood on a hill overlooking Harrow Ridge, the faint outline of the town surrounded by frost-kissed trees. The weight of Maddie's story lingered in the stillness, reminding him of the fragility of life. He vowed to keep the embers of her memory alive, committed to protecting his community from the shadows that had fallen over them. In a heart of turmoil, he found purpose. This battle might have ended, but the quest for understanding and healing had just begun. Reflection. As the last leaves fell from the trees and a blanket of snow coated Harrow Ridge, the community entered a new chapter. Grief had transformed into a more manageable sorrow, allowing room for healing. Sheriff Tom Granger sat at his desk, reflecting on the events that had unfolded over the past year. Cases like Maggie's often left marks that ran far deeper than the scars on the surface. They haunted the quiet places of the muck. The struggle for answers resonated within him, a reminder that every action held consequences far beyond what was first visible. His thoughts drifted to the countless conversations still echoing in his memory, the weary faces of friends and families who had lost a light in their lives. Granger had embraced the weight of responsibility. They needed closure, a smooth path toward healing, but scars would remain. How many more secrets lay buried beneath the surface? In depth, the case unraveled not merely a tragic story of loss, but a humbling reminder of the complexities of love, grief, and the ties that bind, sometimes with chains forged from anger and misunderstanding. Granger knew that while the specter of Maggie's disappearance would linger, her memory would guide them toward empathy in their future interactions, a legacy of compassion, overshadowing that heartbreaking moment in time.